These two companies have an interesting history together. Are they rivals, enemies? Who can say for sure? All that is sure is that these companies differ greatly in ideals and have their own reasons for why. I'll start chronologically first with Nintendo. Ironically, the company started off in 1889, not by selling video games, but by selling Hanafuda cards. These were basically playing cards inspired by their European counterparts that had been associated with gambling and the Japanese mafia. This would lead to a ban on them, but people would play with the cards anyway. During the Meiji period, they started being tolerated by the law. This led to Fusajiro Yamauchi creating Nintendo. Many other Hanafuda companies would decide to stop making Hanafuda cards because of the mafia stigma. Meanwhile, Nintendo continued. They would then move on to various miscellaneous products like toys until they would have the idea to sell video games. In the United States during the 1980s, a large amount of poor quality games would be created, which oversaturated the market. It caused a video game crash that led to many people to stop buying video games. Nintendo would actually save the video games industry by releasing the NES, which would regain the confidence of consumers in the US. They would market it as a toy for boys instead of a video game console for the whole family in advertisements. That's why the Japanese version of the console was named the Famicom in Japan, where the video game crash never happened. While Nintendo saved gaming in the US via consoles and console games, another company was about to be made, and they would innovate massively for PC games. Valve was formed by Gabe Newell and Mike Harrington after gaining enough experience at Microsoft to leave and form their own video game company. They would influence the gaming industry by making games with relatively new ideas and an emphasis on player fun. They are also known for making Steam, currently the world's largest PC game store. Most recently, they have been making hardware that has been slowly gaining traction due to the unique features they have. For example, the Steam Deck, a bridge between a handheld console and a gaming PC. It provides the benefit of portability while keeping the extra features and freedom a PC would offer. Because of these products, many platforms or games have competed with Valve on Steam, their hardware, or their games. Most notably the Epic Games Store, the Asus ROG Ally, and Overwatch. I believe certain events have taken place within these companies' histories that have changed these companies into the way they are now. For Nintendo, it was the Nintendo vs. Universal Studios lawsuit. Universal claimed Nintendo's character of Donkey Kong was trademark infringement of their character King Kong, as they shared similar plots and appearances in each respective media. Nintendo would go on to win the case, but not without the fear of losing the rights to Donkey Kong. This would lead Nintendo to be extremely protective over their IP, heavily combating piracy, fan tournaments, and fan games with legal action. There was even an instance of Nintendo sending a fan a cease and desist letter because they made custom Nintendo Switch controller shells in honor of the late Etika and charity. Valve, on the other hand, has had numerous leaks happening throughout the company's life. The most devastating one being the Half-Life 2 beta leak, which led to a shift in the game's story and Valve's attitude towards building up hype. Valve almost never announces things anymore, and opts instead to release updates or products out of nowhere, like the Half-Life 25th Anniversary update or Counter-Strike 2. There was even a content drought between 2014 and 2019 where barely any games or content were released. This was because multiple projects were under production but scrapped because they felt as if it wouldn't live up to people's expectations, Source 2 wasn't ready yet, or various other reasons. This history has extended towards the company's attitudes towards modding. Nintendo is known for how prolific they are at shutting down fan projects such as Pokemon Uranium and unofficial Smash Bros. Tournaments. It seems even to this day, they feel the need to protect their IP. Valve, however, was built basically on the foundation of modding. Half-Life, their very first game, was built off a heavily modified Quake engine. They allowed the SDK for Half-Life to be readily available, which led to numerous mods like Cry of Fear and Counter-Strike. And they've hired people who have made mods like the creators of Team Fortress, a multiplayer Quake mod. Nintendo is a publicly traded company, meaning that anyone can buy stocks for Nintendo to own portions of the company. As the company grows, so does the value of their stocks. Valve is the opposite as a privately traded company, which means only a select few people can invest in the company. Keep in mind that this is an oversimplification. The difference between these companies leads to different pros and cons. Nintendo has the opportunity to make more money from investors than Valve because it's publicly traded. However, Valve has more freedom to do whatever they want because they don't have to worry about disappointing investors. There hasn't been much information about how Nintendo operates under the surface, although I've tried looking for it. As far as I am aware, Nintendo functions like a regular video game company. Although I could be wrong on this, comment below if you know anything about that. Valve has their employee handbook readily available to read on their website, and people who have worked at Valve have spoken about their experiences, so there's much more information about Valve. They stand out from other companies by how weird their company is structured. There are no managers. Instead, the employees decide for themselves what to work on and set deadlines for themselves. Each desk at Valve has wheels so that employees can move their desk around to anywhere in the office. Employees can form groups called cabals to work on a project together. Often, the most experienced or longest hired employee become team leads. People are paid based on a stack of least productive to most productive employees. This is determined by meetings where coworkers rank each other based on multiple metrics. Employees who would be overperforming would get bonuses, and underperformers would get cuts to their salary. In their headquarters in Bellevue, Washington, there's washing machines so that employees can wash their clothes at the office, a large snack bar, and a play area inspired by Pyroland from TF2 in case employees want to bring their kids over. Why does a company need this? Anyway, I think it is safe to assume that Valve is a very unique company that seems to act more like an indie game company, considering their employee philosophy and low employee count for being a billion-dollar company. Nintendo has been credited with popularizing many innovations for consoles, such as the D-pad, handheld consoles, and motion controls. Valve's hardware has heavily borrowed from Nintendo, with the Steam Deck, for example, borrowing elements from the Switch and the Wii U. Nintendo was the first company of the two to make a VR headset. I say in quotes because the Virtual Boy is on the borderline of being called a VR headset due to many design blunders. The Virtual Boy was too heavy to be strapped on someone's head, but instead of figuring out how to make it lighter, it was placed on a stand instead. The screen would give people eye strain because it was monochromatic in the color red. The Virtual Boy was a flop and would sour the common perception of VR for decades to come, until the Oculus Rift was introduced in 2012. Valve would gain an interest in VR around the time, and in 2015 announced that they were collaborating with HTC to create the Vive headset. Multiple smaller games were released by Valve under this era to experiment with VR, such as The Lab and Steam VR. After gaining some experience from the experimentation, Valve would unveil the Valve Index in 2019. At the time, it had a very high FOV and resolution. After almost 5 years at the time of writing this video, the Index is starting to show its age in its specs, but the Index still somewhat holds up and still has features that almost no other headset has. Finger tracking on the controllers, for example. After a resurgence in VR, Nintendo had decided to dip their toes into VR again with Labo, with lukewarm reception. Ironically, Gabe Newell has said he's always been a little jealous of Nintendo for being able to ship excellent hardware and software alongside each other, which might explain the creation of the Steam Deck. People don't often think about how video game companies interact with each other, but they interact a surprising number of times. Valve and Nintendo are no different. When Dolphin Emulator was planned on being listed on Steam, its Steam page was removed after an interaction between Valve and Nintendo. Despite popular belief, Nintendo did not contact either Dolphin Emulator or Valve directly, but instead Valve would contact Nintendo of America, asking whether they had permission to list the game. And a lawyer representing Nintendo stated, according to Dolphin Emulator, requested Valve prevent Dolphin from releasing on the Steam store, citing the DMCA as justification. Another time, Valve announced the Portal Companion Collection for the Switch out of nowhere, which included Portal 1 and 2. Some people have theorized the only reason Valve made the Companion Collection was that there could be a game to compare on Switch and the Steam Deck. There's probably more instances of the two interacting with each other, but these seemed like the most interesting ones. The things that both companies share is that both companies were at some point considered a monopoly. They have also been criticized of using morally dubious forms of generating monetization, whether it be loot boxes or amiibos. They both have a philosophy of focusing on fun more than most other video game companies out there. Both companies like to do their own thing and tend not to follow pre-established trends. I hope I did not make Nintendo seem too antagonized to the video games industry, as I have a bias over Valve. I think Nintendo makes great games, and I want to see more Nintendo-like games out there. But I think it's good to shed some light on some of the aspects of the company that people might not be too aware about. If you made it this far and enjoyed this video, feel free to subscribe, like, and share the video. Thanks for watching. See ya.